Welcome back all! The day has finally come for the final history of the Overground Series. So let's get straight into it. So the Watford DC line runs from London Euston to Watford Junction, parallel to the West Coast Main Line, with the exception of this little detour around Watford. The London Underground Bakerloo line also runs on a section of the Watford DC line between Queen's Park and Harrow and Wealdstone, utilising the same section of track. It also forms a connection at Wealdstone Junction, where it connects to two other overground lines, the North London line from Stratford to Richmond and the West London line from Stratford to Clapham Junction. And you can check out how these overground lines came about in my other videos on my channel. The Watford DC line also connects with the London North West trains at Euston, Wembley Central, Harrow and Wealdstone, Bushey and Watford Junction, and this is the case for southern trains as well at 3 of these stops. Watford Junction also has a connection to the Abbey line, which heads on a shuttle service between St Albans and Watford Junction. There are also a few out of station interchanges with the Met line between Kenton and Northwich Park, as well as the Jubilee line at South Hampstead and Swiss Cottage. Oh, and let's not forget to mention the Calamity at Euston with 7 other London Underground lines. In all, it had a somewhat simple history, but of course we're going to be digging into this a little bit more. So it all started in July 1837, where the link between London Euston and Hemel Hempstead was created by the London and Birmingham Railway Company. At the time, this stopped at Wealdstone, which opened in 1841 before closing that year and reopening a little bit later in 1844, Harrow and Wealdstone, which was known as Harrow at the time, and Watford. This was eventually extended further north to Birmingham and the north, but that's another story. It wasn't long after, in 1846, where a change of company happened, with the London and Birmingham Railway Company being amalgamated into the London North West Railway Company. In 1858, Watford Station closed, with Watford Junction opening down the line, and I believe this was done due to capacity and logistical reasons, along with the installation of the Abbey line, although the original Grade 2 station building still remains in place next to this housing development. A couple years later, in 1862, a new line was formed between Watford and Rickmansworth Church Street. This was a 4.5 mile line with only one intermediate station at Watford High Street, and the idea was formed by Lord Ebury, who wanted to connect Uxbridge, where the Great Western Railway had reached, to Watford, where the London North West Railway Company was operating. Anyway, I believe this is the first and only phase of the project, and a depot was also built near Croxley Green. On another note, Wealdstone Station closed 4 years later in 1866, and a new station, known today as Wealdstone Junction, the low-level one let me add, opened up. Railway competition was on the increase as the Metropolitan Railway was steadily expanding into northwest London, and the London North West Railway Company was keen to act against emerging competition and had recently obtained the Rickmansworth to Watford line in 1881. And by 1908, work had begun on a new branch line to Croxley Green, calling at Watford West. The extension involved the construction of substantial new bridges over the Grand Junction Canal, with passenger services operating in June 1912. During this time, a load of new stations opened up on the line, including Bushey in 1841, Hatch End in 1842, Kilburn High Road in 1853, and Primrose Hill in 1855. Oh, and let's not forget about South Hampstead and Queen's Park in 1879. Now, with the backstory out the way, the actual Watford DC line opened and became operational in the same year, 1912, and this was completed by the London and North West Railway between Camden and Watford Junction, known as the New Line. And this was to provide additional suburban capacity and more outer suburban services to run non-stop to Euston. In essence, these were relief lines. A year later, in 1913, the London North Western Railway Company built a spur from the Croxley Rickmansworth Railway south towards Euston, meaning trains could operate directly between the two stations. 2 years later, the Bakerloo line had extended further north to Queen's Park, where it joined the Watford DC line, and electrification began happening a couple years later in 1917 by the London Electric Railway Company. So this means Bakerloo line services, who were part of this LER company, were extended over from Queen's Park to Watford Junction. And in 1923, the London North West Railway Company got absorbed into the London, Midland and Scottish Railway. In 1925, the Metropolitan Railway had finally reached Croxley, although the two stations didn't meet. Passenger services ceased to run on the Rickmansworth portion of the line in 1952, with most of the branch being closed entirely in 1960, although the track did remain in place. Rickmansworth Church Street Railway Station and its tracks continued to be used by goods services until 1967, where it was then completely closed and the line cut back to a freight siding. A considerable length of the trackbed is now used by the Ebury Way cycle path, as you can see here. Meanwhile, Bakerloo line services were cut back in stages and ceased north of Stonebridge Park Station in 1982. However, 2 years later, they were restored again as far as Harrow and Wealdstone, where it remains today. Now, you might be wondering, what happened to the Croxley Link? Well, things were steady for a little bit, but in the 1980s, attempts were made to revive the Croxley Green branch. A new football halt was built, known as Watford Stadium Halt, in 1982, and this was used for football supporters of the nearby Watford FC. And in 1996, a new dual carriage was built around the Croxley Green area. This essentially cut the line in half, and services, as a consequence, were abandoned. This literally marked the end of the line, as you can see. I would love to go and show you this myself, but I don't have a car, so you have Google to thank. You can still see some of the old track beds, and the fact that the rail literally just stops. There are also glimpses of the old platforms at Watford West seen from this bridge. The branch was abandoned and not formally closed until 2003. Anyway, whilst all this was happening, British Rail had operated the line from Euston to Watford as well as the little bit to Croxley Green as Network South East from 1986 until privatisation. And from March 1997 until November 2007, the line was operated by Silverlink. Mind, during this point, the Croxley Green branch did close, and in November 2007, Transport for London took over full management of the line and all intermediate Watford DC stations, and now remains part of the London Overground Service, and this is where it remains today. Now, one of the proposed links that has been planned for a while now is the Croxley Railway Link, which basically envisions closing part of the Watford branch down of the Met Line before redirecting it via Casio Bridge, Watford Vicarage Road, where it replaces both the previous stations, if you remember, and reopens the stretch of track along from Watford West, and essentially reinstating the Croxley Green to Watford Junction service. This will form an interchange with the London Overground and is dependent on the outcome of other projects. Funding was initially agreed in November 2015, although costs did rise. Right now, I don't think the project is completely shelved. I think it is looking for more funding, and various councils have tried to acquire this. I still think it will be another couple years at least before anything gets approved. And if this happens, Lord Ebury's plan might actually come to some fruition. As I'm sure some of you are also aware, there are talks to rename the Overground lines and potentially its colours as part of Sadiq's campaign for the Mayor of London. If anything, the Watford DC branch might be kept this, or it could be changed to the Harlequin Line, which is what it was formerly known as. As for the colour, I hope it stays some shade of orange. Anyway all, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this series, as I have definitely learned a lot behind it. Anyway, I guess we'll have to see what's coming up next time, so feel free to leave your comments down below, and I'll see you next time.